2021 Season 1 has seen us go to a variety of circuits, from road courses, to ovals, to super speedways, to short tracks. But today, we're set for what could be one of the biggest challenges when it comes to mile-and-a-half circuits in all of NASCAR. It's a circuit known for its tire wear, known for its celebrations, and known for its great races. We're all set to go. The question is, who will take home the final checkered flag of the campaign? We're about to find out here on the Global Sim Racing channel. Hello everyone and welcome to the virtual Homestead Miami Speedway for the final race of 2021 Season 1's campaign for the Precision Racing League Cup Series. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside the booth tonight is Christian Challoner. Behind the scenes is our director Sean Ambrose, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to tonight's race, but first things first, let's learn about our facility tonight, Homestead Miami Speedway, with your GSRC track guide.
The track boom of the 1990s and recovery after the devastating Hurricane Andrew brought this gem of a southern Florida track. It started out a bit rough. In 1995, the initial layout was like a smaller Indianapolis. It really didn't work. Slow, narrow, passing was near impossible, so they widened the track. That brought out a larger problem of crashing. They tore up the corners and made it into a traditional oval. Racing improved greatly, and in 2002, NASCAR moved all of their top-tier series finales to South Florida, and they would stay there for 17 years. Each end of the racetrack produces multi-groove racing and passing opportunities. The approach to turns 1 and 2 has produced numerous race-changing moments over the years, as it just invites you to make a move. You hit that 18 to 20 degree progressively banked corner and it becomes a matter of who can get it back on the gas faster as you hit the backstretch and the row of palm trees that awaits you. Turns 3 and 4 are just as multi-grooved, although a few small bumps in the low lane make the high line just a little more appealing. Even then, guys will use that low lane for a challenge that could last all the way to the checkered flag. Nowadays, Homestead's biggest customers on the oval are NASCAR vehicles. The trucks, B-Class, and Cup cars all make trips here and put on fantastic shows. USAC Silver Crowns raced here as well, and that often shows up on iRacing's official calendar for that car. Welcome to Homestead Miami Speedway, where the racing action is just as hot as those South Miami beaches.
That's a look at your GSRC track guide for Homestead Miami Speedway. Now let's bring my broadcast partner for tonight, and Christian Challoner, as we're in Homestead, Florida for tonight's action. What are your thoughts for these Cup cars tonight here at this facility?
Yeah, pretty good mile and a half. This a lot of people's favorites. Obviously got a good degree of variable banking here, so 18 degrees to 20 degrees progressive. It does mean that the top line's a little bit more usable through 1 and 2, so we should definitely expect to see some guys trying some moves through there. And really, it's just this is a track that a lot of people love. You know, it's just a great track to drive, and it's a lot of fun to race on.
A lot of fun indeed, and I think tonight's race is going to feature a lot of fun, to say the very least, across this entire field here at this mile-and-a-half facility. Absolutely. Now, I'd like to remind you of the series sponsors for tonight's action. This series is sponsored by SimMSA. SimMSA provides many consulting services, from completely customizing simulators to managing teams, individual drivers, and managing complete events. SimMSA is working hard to bring communities, associations, organizations, companies, manufacturers, teams, and drivers together, all at one place to support and promote sim racing internationally, bridging virtual and real motorsports, and providing understanding, a link, and network between these two, involving sim racers, real drivers, teams, and crew members, managers, engineers, and of course, motorsports fans alike. This series is also sponsored by Butt Kicker. Butt Kicker products include incredible immersion and bring realism to every game. Feel every nuance and truly put yourself in the driver's seat. And by NinjaTrader. Ready to compete against the financial markets? Supporting more than 60,000 users across the globe, NinjaTrader provides award-winning trading software and brokerage services. NinjaTrader is always free to use for advanced charting, backtesting, and trade simulation. Visit NinjaTrader.com to get started with a risk-free trading simulator and start tracking your performance. Speaking of tracking performance, let's take a look at your championship standings entering the season finale for this campaign. Your driver standings see a separation of 44 points between James O'Brien and Connor Hall. Of note, from race control entering tonight's action, James O'Brien just needs to complete one lap to secure the Season 1 championship. The battle is still on, though. For second on back, Adam Zemke is in third, 47 points back of O'Brien, but 3 of Hall. Joshua Daniels coming into tonight is in fourth. Bradley Hulley rounds out your top 5. That, in turn, sees an interesting team championship standings, where private label Team Hype looks for yet another championship. They have a good mathematical position, 69 points, over Wonderback Racing Black. Carl Ramrod, SGE eSports, and Wonderback Racing Orange round out your top 5 entering tonight's action here at Homestead. Separation of 232 points. 3 different organizations in turn have found their way into victory lane this campaign. Those teams being Connor Hall Esports, along with Wedge International Racing, and private label Team Hype. But tonight's race is going to be an interesting one, Christian. It's going to be one of the longer ones of the season, in fact, 45 laps rather, as we look towards our details for tonight.
Yep, round 10 of 10, so the final round of this first quarter season of the year. 145 laps, as you say, or 90 minutes. I suspect what we'll see is drivers splitting this race into 3 segments, really, of about 50 laps each. So they have 4 sets of tires total, 3 in the pits. So I expect that they're basically going to keep 1 in reserve in case we get any late race cautions. But that's going to be interesting around this track. Obviously, it is pretty heavy on tires and no fast repairs either.
So at the very minimum, 2-stopper on the fuel for tonight's action as drivers are in the midst of final practice, in the final few moments of that set practice as well, where it's Joshua Daniels who's at the top of the board with a 30.655, followed by Trent Dinkle, Patrick Calgill, David Wilson Jr., and Mark Cale in the top 5. Just outside that mark is James O'Brien with a 30.960 at the moment. The pace looking very quick for some of our competitors tonight. The average pace around the 30.9s to 31.1s on the practice chart.
Yeah, Joshua Daniels is pretty good advantage right now at 10th on the field, so obviously he's looking very, very strong. Pretty much champion to be. He only needs to complete 1 lap tonight. Looks like he's going to have a pretty solid run to a top 5, I suspect, for James O'Brien.
So Abner Acosta we're falling on board with, who's been having a successful campaign. We've talked about him. He ended up coming away with the victory at the Daytona Road Course last round. A max points day, in fact, of 47 total points. That was his 4th top 5 and 5th top 10 of the season. Acosta 15th in the points entering tonight. We'll see how he does in this race. He is towards the bottom half of the pylon in practice, as we have wrapped said practice up. As we're ready to go solo qualifying, 5 minutes, 2 qualifying laps. Air temp 81 degrees today. Fahrenheit, partly cloudy skies. 102 is the track temp Fahrenheit. For our competitors, the winds gusting 2 miles an hour to the north. Humidity at 50% for today's qualifying session. Those drivers now all set to roll their way onto the racetrack. And for qualifying, what are your thoughts on how you want to take this racetrack to get the best qualifying time possible?
Well, it's a little bit more difficult than a regular 1.5 miles where you can get around the track without any lifting, so that's definitely a bit more of a challenge, I would say, especially the 3 and 4 end of the racetrack. You might see some guys with maybe a slightly better car able to get through 1 and 2, maybe on the verge of flat out. I'm not 100% if they'll be able to, but definitely in 3 and 4 you're absolutely lifting, and it's really line critical through there as well, because if you just miss the line a little bit, if you're just slightly too low, everybody's always shooting for that line that's just above that kind of last lane of the racetrack. If you get a little bit too low, it can go around on you. If you get a little bit too high, you'll just lose time and you won't be able to get back to the gas as fast as you'd like. So it's a pretty difficult 1.5 miles to qualify for, actually.
Especially with aggressive banking here too, as we fall with Dinkle as he tries to make his way around the racetrack. Dinkle, of course, one of the top practicers so far, a 30.867 to start off qualifying. And based on the trends, majority of the competitors, Christian, have been able to get their quickest times on the 2nd lap here, even though the fall off here is one of the bigger amounts of fall off for a 1.5 miles on the service.
Yeah, it's a little bit surprising actually that guys are going faster on their second lap, but I mean, hey, whatever works for them, you know. Obviously, I'm kind of used to seeing guys go fastest on their first lap around here, but maybe they just got a little bit more confidence on the second lap, having kind of ran through 1 and 2, figured out if they can get through that wide open, and then 3 and 4 in terms of getting the line right. But normally I would, if I was in a 2-lap run around this track, I would probably sacrifice the first lap and kind of just use it to get up to speed and come off the 3 and 4 running right up against the wall.
Note after Acosta with a 30.772 is at the top of the board now, followed by Dinko, Joshua Daniels, Wilson Jr., and James O'Brien. Already 21 drivers have set times. The only one's not going to get to set times are Hilton, who just crossed the stripe, Pat Harvey, who just crossed the stripe, and Chad Brown, who is not on the circuit. The tough part is Hilton and Harvey are both at the bottom of the board in the 33-second bracket to start off their qualifying sessions. The most of the field is in the 31 flats at the moment, especially from about 8th on the way down to about 15th or so, give or take.
Yeah, I can only suspect that those guys either had a major mistake on their first lap or they were using it to get up to speed, because it's obviously significantly off the pace.
A 31.686 for Hilton sees him stay in 23rd position, while Pat Harvey is in 21st with a 31.5 on his second lap. Both of them wrap up, and real quickly, just like that, all drivers have wrapped up their qualifying times. Only Chad Brown is to take a qualifying time in the session. On that note then, Christian, quick qualifying session. Your thoughts on what you've seen from qualifying, where some drivers are separated by 1/1000th of a second, 10th through 12th, for example? Yeah,
it's a little bit surprising, actually. Normally we see guys kind of bookend the qualifying session. Some guys go out real early. Some guys try and run right up to the time limit. So it's actually kind of surprising to see everybody all go out and get finished up early. But yeah, as you say, obviously very, very tight. Through 10th through 12th is extremely close. 1/1000th through that gap. One thing that was a little bit surprising to me was Pat Harvey being back there in 21st with that 31.53. I know that he works with Robert Bisson Jr., and he's almost a half second ahead of him and in 10th right there with the 31.0.
And that track position could be very critical tonight. Dirty air has been a talking point all week, Christian, so that could majorly hamper his day.
Yeah, that's for sure. It is actually quite tricky to get past people around this track. Obviously, open setup helps a little bit because we get a little bit more separation with the field, and we'll have guys who've got better long run, better short run cars. So we'll see more variation there, but it is still going to be difficult to get by people. Obviously, through 1 and 2, there's a little bit more lane option, but through 3 and 4, it is pretty much going to be everybody trying to get to that first seam and kind of hugging the bottom like that.
Final moments of the clock rolling down here at Homestead Miami Speedway. Again, Abner Acosta setting the best time today with a 30.7. The only driver in the 30.7 bracket for today. He'll be amongst the competitors looking to keep that track position early on in what's expected to be an intriguing race today. And as the pit boxes have rolled their way into their stalls, the cars are all set to roll their way onto pit lane. It's time to look at your starters for tonight's season finale for the Precision Racing League Cup Series. On the pole tonight is Abner Acosta with Trent Dinkel in second position. Separation by about half a tenth. Joshua Daniels and David Wilson Jr. starts in row 2, with James O'Brien and his teammate Richard Regan Jr. starting in row 3. Charles Sumner starts in row 4 alongside Patrick Calgill, while Adam Zemke starting in 9th will be alongside Robert Bisson Jr. Bisson Jr. rounds out your top 10, Christian.
Yeah, next up is the tightest row on the grid here. James Duke with the 31.042 lines up in 11th. Jose Medina just 1,000th behind him in 12th. Next row back, we got Michael Witt and Bradley Holly actually pretty far down the pylon. Not expecting to see him that far back. Behind him, we've got Colton Lane, Brandon Walter, Mark Kalin, Mike Knight, Danny Cervantes, Doug Evans round out the top 20.
Pat Harvey, 21st position tonight, starts alongside James Dewar, who has had an up-and-down season of 31.5 in qualifying. The last drivers in the field are Baron Hilton and Chad Brown. 24 drivers are all set to try and race around Homestead Miami Speedway for 145 laps or 90 minutes for what's expected to be an intriguing season finale. As the rest of the drivers roll the way onto the racetrack, I'd like to remind you once again of your weather tonight. 81 degrees Fahrenheit is your air temp. 103 is your track temp for tonight. Wind not expected to be a factor at 2 miles an hour, but humidity is at 50%. It is February 27, 2021 in Sim Day, just past 1:20 p.m. for today's green flag. Your keys to victory tonight, Christian, in this one.
Well, I expect that we're going to see a lot of green flag running, and it's quite a difficult pit lane to get down into on a green flag pit stop. We saw in the NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series race, Brad Davis having quite an interesting pit entry with a 360. So that's a key point of this racetrack that you've got to avoid. You don't have to use the access road like you did in the past, and that always used to kind of unstick people, but it's still very, very difficult to get the car slowed down off of 4 and into pit lane. And I do think we'll see green flag pit stops, so avoiding penalties, getting in and out of pit road effectively and without penalty, I would say is going to be my key to this.
Cars now rolling here. Who are some of your drivers to watch in your opinion tonight for this finale?
Well, obviously Abner Acosta has been pretty strong all season. It's been probably his strongest season in the league, I think, and we know he's good on road courses, and we've seen that he can compete on mile and a halves, but he's normally having to come from kind of a disadvantage. So this time's going to be interesting, obviously starting on the pole, see if he can hold on to that track position. Besides him, I'm going to be looking at Bradley Holly. He's back there in 14th. I expect we'll see him move up towards the top 5 pretty quick.
Indeed. We'll have to see which driver comes away with a checkered flag tonight. Should be an intriguing season finale here from Homestead Miami Speedway. The iRacing pace car is off. Green flag is out. We're racing from Homestead. About 0.6 of a second over Trent Dinko and David Wilson Jr. Richard Regan Jr. is already shuffled his way to 4th. Calgill up 3 spots off the jump to get to the top 5.
Yeah, sort of a lot of battling behind those guys. Obviously, everybody trying to get into line, but a couple of drivers actually out there trying to take advantage of maybe a couple of people being a bit conservative there. Mark Kalin drove in all the way on the white line in 3 and 4 and actually made it happen. He's up 6 spots in 1 lap.
And that's tricky. Normally you see drivers run around the end of the first seam here at Homestead at both ends of the racetrack, as you see with Dinkel. But what a short run pace for Acosta to break off in a way to start things off in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just gone out there and just pulled a huge gap already, but the thing is he's going to put a lot of energy into the tires already, so we'll have to keep an eye on if that kind of comes back to haunt him later on in the run.
We talked about this before the race. James O'Brien took the start and took the first lap. That means one thing. The number 9 machine is your 2021 Season 1 champion with a grand total of 1 victory, 9 top 5s, and 9 top 10s entering tonight. His worst point performance, round 2, where he had just 41. And that is very difficult to do. What he's been able to do all season is score more than 40 points in every single race, Christian.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've not necessarily seen him always outright fighting for the victory, obviously only picking up 1 win, but at the same time, he's always been there. You know, like every time you've looked at the top 5, he's always been there. He's never had a bad race, really. And obviously, the move to open setups has actually kind of swung the balance really towards him, I would say. Obviously, we saw that Connor Hall was very impressive on long run, but the driver that kind of fell back a little bit was Richard Regan Jr., and the driver who went forward was James O'Brien.
Of course, the organization looking to cap things off with an air victory as well as the team title, as Bradley Hawley for Winnebago Racing Black starting to make his way through the field. We talked about his struggles in qualifying. He's now up 6 positions in just 6 laps this time by.
He's been very methodical about moving his way through the field and has got it done, and now got a little bit of clean air before he gets the next car ahead of him.
The fall for some of these drivers, by the way, already half a second, Christian. And it's fallen off as much as 2.5, 3 seconds from some drivers this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Tire fall off at Homestead has always been quite proportionally large, and obviously at a track where you're pretty much lifting all the way from the go, it's more obvious, I would say, than we used to. I'd say a more traditional mile and a half is maybe the best way to put it.
Absolutely. And as well, if you don't find that balance to be able to have that long run pace, it can be trouble, because if you're too tight, let's say, you're going backwards in this field tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. You really do have to get the balance right. As you say, obviously, if you're too tight, you're just going to struggle to get rotated, and you're going to basically have no entry speed. And then when you're behind cars, it's going to be more difficult for you, because you're just going to get even tighter. But on the other hand, if you're too loose, you're going to struggle on restarts, that's for sure, because you're just not going to be able to commit to the throttle with confidence. And then later in the run, you're going to get to the point where you're going to struggle to get off the corner. So it's really difficult to actually stay in the window at this racetrack, and it's one of the few, I would say, you can make genuinely impactful adjustments on pit road that will really turn a car around.
The intervals for the battle for the race lead. Right now it's a separation of 1.1 seconds or so between Acosta and Dinkel. Then you have Richard Regan Jr., who's been able to reel him in, but he's in the dirty air of Dinkel. Then you have Wilson Jr. behind 6/10. Calgill is half a second back, and then you have James O'Brien about 3/10 back. So all these drivers are trying to reel back in the number 5 machine after he pulled away and quick off the jump.
Yeah, and his last lap 32.26 compared to Richard Regan Jr.'s 32.0. So Regan Jr.'s got a lot of pace in the car, but as you say, that dirty air is going to make it difficult for him to get up there and challenge him.
It's to the point where we see Acosta trying to use the higher lines, in fact, Christian. Do you think that's intentional there, or do you feel that's just from the balance of the car from pushing hard early?
I feel like it's probably a combination of the two. Obviously, if you realize that you're starting to struggle, that's when drivers kind of start to move around the track a little bit. That said, there's some guys who really just like to run higher up through 1 and 2 at this track, and maybe he's one of them.
Running about a lane and a half higher than the rest of the cars you see, but everyone else is running that seam and has already closed the gap up to about 6/10. Regan Jr., though, wants to try and pass Dinkel, having to be defensive this time of the entry to turns 3 and 4.
Yeah, and this is a situation where you can tell that Richard Regan Jr. has really got a lot of pace in his car right now, because he's just able to follow Trent Dinkel so closely, and you just can't really do that with an equal car, because you're just in that point where you're just suffering from the aero push. So the fact that he's able to be within about a car length right there, you can tell that he's got a good piece, and that he's probably going to be able to challenge for the win here.
By the way, his teammate James O'Brien is up to 5th position after passing David Wilson Jr. back. So after Wilson Jr. had let him on go, Patrick Calgill is currently leading the second grouping of cars at the moment. Taking a look towards that direction right now, in fact, as Wilson Jr. is losing time to Robert Bisson Jr., who's now in the attack.
Yeah, we always see that Bisson Jr. is pretty aggressive here, but this makes sense, you know, like we keep talking about how the effect of the dirty air is, and in my experience it tends to get worse the longer the run goes on. So if you've got an opportunity to get by someone early on, I really think that you have to take it, because if you don't, that opportunity might just continually slip away.
Change for second position. Richard Regan Jr. has just passed Trent Dinkel for that spot, being able to get to the inside in 3 and 4. Now he looks for the race lead, as the gap is only about 2-3 car lengths between Acosta and Regan Jr. Up the track goes the 5.
Yeah, Acosta really struggling right now, almost in the wall on the exit of turn 2 there, so you can tell he's pushing hard. But Regan Jr. much lower coming off the corner, and got a great run on him right there. I think it's only a matter of time.
And the time looks to be right about now, side by side for the race lead. Costa trying to hold on to the safer barrier. Regan Jr. being given the space. And Regan Jr., the multiple-time PRL Cup Series champion, now to the race lead.
Making it look pretty easy, actually, to pull that pass off. And now Acosta looks like he's under threat from Dinkel as well.
almost looks like he pushed too hard to try and build up a buffer, because right now he is turning lap times that are 33.2s. The fastest cars are in the 32.9s and the 33.1s at the moment.
Yeah, we sort of build that 1 second advantage within 2 laps as Dinkel goes to his inside here, and Acosta kind of gave that up a little bit actually. He's made it pretty easy for Dinkel to get the pass on him, but yeah, Acosta shot out there so fast, and I'm guessing he just completely burnt up his tires within the first 5 laps or so, and now he's really paying the price for it, and he's got to hold on to those for around about another 30 laps before he can get a fresh start.
Should be worth noting that there is lap traffic ahead. James Duke did not make the start today. He started from the pit lane after qualifying in 11th position. So that is now feeding some dirty air potential to Richard Regan Jr., who's up in the front and turned a lap time 0.3 quicker than Dinkel last time by. Duke would be the only person 1 lap down. Everyone else is within 10 seconds still.
Yeah, you can see Duke at the front of the field there. A little bit of a disadvantage right now for Richard Regan Jr. because he's not able to kind of stretch out without running into the trailing air at the car ahead of him. So holding him back just a little bit. I'll be interested to see what pace he can run once he clears Duke.
Right now trying to give him some space as Regan Jr. goes under the seam, in fact, be able to complete the pass and put James Duke 1 lap down. He is the first lap car of the race. Some space with 127 laps to go so far. Richard Regan Jr. has stretched the lead now to almost 9/10. The rest of the field. Acosta slipped his way back to 3rd position. James O'Brien is the next car that could potentially reel in the 5 machine in a couple laps.
Yeah, it definitely looks like O'Brien's going to be Abner Acosta's rear bumper in probably a lap at the current rate, so we'll have to keep an eye on that.
An eye you see on screen with Trent Dinkel with the lap traffic trying to find space. Should have some space to be able to get on by into turn 3, but that battle we were talking about sees O'Brien just able to stick that seam much more better, and you mentioned more off throttle time. How tricky is that here, knowing at some tracks you maybe crack the throttle a little bit, can go half throttle, still be able to save tires, but here with the old track surface it's not that simple.
Yeah, I mean, it's just significantly different. Obviously, the driving style with the high downforce package is to be pretty much wide open for, in some cases, about 10 laps of the 1.5 miles. But here, you're lifting pretty much all the way from lap 1, as we see James O'Brien making that pass look pretty easy there, slipping underneath the 5 with the advantage coming off of 4. But you're actually, in some cases, even getting on the brake here when you get deep into the run. So it is genuinely quite a different style of driving than what a lot of these guys are probably used to.
Almost like the Legacy Kentucky in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very similar. Obviously, not quite as rough and bumpy a surface as Legacy Kentucky, but driving style, yeah, I would say that they're very, very similar.
Right now on lap 21, coming to lap 22 this time by Mark Kalin. I'm keeping my eye on is 5.9 seconds back in the lead, but he's already jumped up 9 positions and already jumped his way past Joshua Daniels for position.
Yeah, and Kalin was very, very aggressive at the start of the race, and obviously has made that pay off. And I'm actually surprised that he hasn't kind of paid the price for that. But right now he's in a pretty good position. He's not really under threat from anybody.
Really slid the tires though coming off of turn 2. Looked like he was a little bit loose throughout the corner exit, and that's a good question to lean on towards, is how do you try and find that balance between having a car that is going to be neutral enough to be able to drive behind air cars in dirty air, but then not loose enough too loose rather, to the point where you're slipping and sliding and you get reeled into battles such as this that are starting to build up behind.
Well, it's just extremely difficult, you know, and it's one of those things where having teammates to practice with really, really helps in that respect, because you can really get a feel of how you race around other cars, as we see Zemke going to the inside of the 67 of Pat Harvey here.
-3 on the race. Pat Harvey, we talked about, had a rough qualifying session. Going to make the pass though on the high side. Pat Harvey, one of the quicker cars in this pack, running 33.6s, 33.8s, turned by Wilson Jr. and Charles Sumner in front of him, as Harvey able to make the move.
Yeah, Wilson Jr. went way up the racetrack right there. He's going to lose the spot to Zemke as well, and looks like he's kind of hunting around trying to find something to work with at the moment, and started in 4th and has drifted back to 11th right now. He's trying to run the very top of the racetrack, but just not finding any pace up there.
Yeah, just not working for him so far. Wilson Jr. now back 11 positions. Most spots lost so far in the race is from him outside of James Duke, who is minus 13. Meanwhile, Joshua Daniels has jumped past Mark Kalin now once again. Kalin starting to really lose that rear end.
Yeah, I see Kalin being very aggressive early on, and not too much of a surprise to see him starting to struggle a little bit, but what's surprising to see Joshua Daniels actually back there, because he started in 3rd, so to fall back is interesting. I'm wondering if he's intentionally done that. He's tried to save a bit of tire by really running easy for the first 25, but that's a long time to be patient for and to wait.
And there's some who say, just worry about your own race, worry about saving those tires and hitting those marks. How do you try and focus on doing that while then also looking in your back mirror and seeing, say, 3-4 cars lining up or several others all wanting to make passes right now who don't want to do that save route and don't want to be patient on that?
Well, it's very difficult in that respect, because you kind of have to have a balance between letting guys go and then also being a bit maybe Brian Newman about it, because the thing is, if you make it harder for them to get by you, then your advantage when you're saving through all this is actually going to be even more the more cars you keep behind, obviously, because you've got less cars to repass. So it's a fine balance, and it's not easy to get right.
Of note, Brownlee Holly has gone up to 6th position, passing teammate Patrick Calgill in the Winnebago Racing Camp. Also, you have this battle going on. This is for about 12 on back. Mike Knight, one of the drivers who started towards the back in this race, is up 5 positions. And his organization getting ready for Road to Pro campaigns coming up for several different drivers. As well, you have Brandon Walter for private label Team Hype, who's currently in 14th position. Some of their drivers are currently in the midst of preparations for Lionheart this year in open wheel racing as well.
Yeah, Walter's been a little bit static here, I would say. He started in 16th. He is up 2 spots, but the guys around him have really been the ones who've been moving a lot. Mike Knight up 5. Adam Zemke actually down 3.
Meanwhile, Bisson Jr. and Acosta have now swapped positions. Robert Bisson Jr., in fact, is the quickest car on the racetrack at the moment, up to 4th position. Been looking very solid today here in that newly sponsored car. Yes, that is some new logos that are on that hood for today's race.
Yeah, he's having a great night. Obviously, maybe didn't get the qualifying that he would have liked, but has carved his way through the field very, very efficiently, and it's working out for him. And as you say, fastest car on track, he might have something here if he can be close enough to Regan Jr. to challenge. That
is the DOFreality.com logos you see there in regards to motion simulators. So, able to pick up some sponsorship for that car for this race for tonight for the season finale. Very sporty, to say the very least. 33.6s. Regan Jr. has dropped off to the 33.7s for comparison's sake. Pat Harvey, meanwhile, is running 33.5 in traffic. His teammate in 9th still.
Yeah, Pat Harvey is always an impressive driver on long runs, so I'm not too surprised to see him be so strong at this point, but obviously having to recover from that 21st starting spot, he's got a long way to go. Right now, he's just over 8 seconds off the lead.
Yeah, it's been a solid drive, though. Plus 12 for him on the race today. Next car up is Joshua Daniels, you see up the road. And this is where the patience game almost starts to come in, because you know that dirty air is going to be a factor and can make things longer. It's almost like a short track, like, say, a Martinsville or a Dover, where it can take several laps to set up the pass.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the dirty air, it is always difficult to kind of get close enough. And one thing that I found with it is you really have to build up to it. What you can't do is you can't really try and instantly close the gap. You know, like once you feel that you're being affected by it, the key to it is to slowly close the gap, because if you just try and get it all in one go, that's when you'll probably lose the nose and you'll just fall back to where you were. And that's a frustrating experience, but you know, you can work past it, as we see right now. Brian is kind of right in that region that I'm talking about.
I want to give a shout out to Dinkle and how he's performed so far, though, Christian, because he's kept the track position, he's kept solid pace in the 33.7 still. But he came into tonight just 18th in the point standings. Only one top 5 entering Homestead. This has been his best race by far in a mile and a half, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, no question about that at all. Right now, obviously, just over 2 seconds off the lead, and we're almost to the end of this first run. So clearly, it's not just a case of he got there on a short run, or he did something different in terms of strategies to cycle himself there. He's absolutely there on pace alone. And right now, James O'Brien looks a little bit faster, but you know, like he's definitely a top 5 contender tonight.
Performance for the Wedgehammer Racing Machine, and that leads into the next question: strategy and pit stops. How would you break this race down tonight as we reach 110 to go?
Well, it breaks down into about 48 laps per run, so I suspect that we'll see drivers coming down as maybe as early as 45 and probably as late as 50, and I think that's kind of the region that we should be looking at.
You mentioned the adjustments are also going to matter in the pit lane. What type of adjustments may you see as we have one car in the wall? Calgill in the wall. Let's take a look at what happened, as it's Patrick Calgill, who is having a solid race, who ends up sliding up in that air and up into the wall.
Yeah, it looked like he was a little bit away from the line that he wanted to be in, kind of in the mid-corner. It looked like he just grabbed the very bottom groove, but that's a decent amount of damage to the right side of that car, and that's going to be hurt.
Calgill has already lost several positions as a result of that to 9th spot, and he's definitely going to be hurt the rest of the race. He needs a caution flag. The entire right side crushed in, and from the front and the back, and the spoiler is crushed in.
Yeah, he got it pretty square, but he also got it pretty hard, and as you say, there's damage all along the right side of that car, so he will want a caution because he's going to be struggling for straight line speed right now.
Someone known for trying to mix things up on strategy is Colton Lane. He is the first driver in, and he pits very early tonight on lap 38. So an interesting call here, a massive undercut. This is something drivers were able to do in official racing for NIS competition. You don't normally see it, though, for this type of a long distance of 145 laps to try and break it down like this.
Yeah, so he's going for a very aggressive short pit strategy here, and what his whole goal with this is that he's just going to gain a lot of track position before the rest of the field comes down the pits, and he's just going to try and hold on to that until the end of the race. And obviously with the difficulty in passing, it can work out very, very well, but it really does require a robust defense to make it work. You know, like when those guys on new tires catch you, you can't really just let them by. I mean, if they've got massive pace advantage on you, it's going to happen anyway. But you know, what it's about is it's about cycling up the order, and then as tires even out, when guys catch you, maybe they're only a 10th of a lap faster, which is normally a lot, but that's close enough where, you know, you can fight them and maybe stop them getting by you.
Now it gets into the discussion point too, with all these cars thinking about their stops and the adjustments too, is what adjustments would you make in this type of a race today?
I think it comes down to really what you've got going on for balance, and if you've got any problems in the car. Obviously the issue right there with the 62 is that he's just absolutely wrecking loose at this point. So I imagine we'll see Mark Kalin is definitely going to make a wedge change. He had a lot of short run pace, but it just looks like he's way too loose on the long run to make anything happen. So for him, definitely would go for a wedge change. But when I talk about some problems, something that can happen pretty easily at mile-and-a-half tracks is to kind of be too aggressive with splitter height, and if you're dragging that, it's a significant loss in performance. So you can lower the rear of the car a little bit and maybe trade off a little bit of overall aero performance just to try and get that splitter.
Noticing here with Mark Kalin, by the way, he barely lifted into the corner, by the way. That's why he slid so much in 1 and 2. I think he's trying to carry too much throttle possibly here in this.
Yeah, it almost looks like he's kind of created his own issue. As you say, they're carrying a lot of throttle into the corner, really slipping the right rear to kind of get it to rotate. And obviously over a long run, that's just going to go against you.
Of note, James O'Brien has made the move on Trent Dinkle. That was last time by, gained a 1/10 of a second, made the pass look easy. And now it's a 1-2 for the private label Team Hype Machines.
Running extremely well. There's a pair of cars right here, and we've got this big group going on that's from about 5th down to 10th on back.
That's where Acosta's now really sliding up the racetrack. Really struggling. They have James Duke as well and Fresh Tires driving on by. Only 2 drivers who are on the lead lap have pit so far. Lane and Aaron Hilton. Hilton had pit a couple laps ago, but he had damage. He was in the back of the field.
We see Joshua Daniels starting to move his way forwards just a little bit towards the end of this run. I feel like maybe he's waited a little bit too long. Abner Acosta obviously went extremely hard at the beginning of the race, and it's really gone against him. He's almost 10 seconds off the lead right now.
Coming into the pit lane now is Mark Kalin, and that was coming. He ends up getting damage on the right side of the car as well. Of note on that 62 since the last time we peeked in. Pat Harvey also making the move now on Acosta. So the window is now open for the drivers struggling for grip. We'll see if anyone else follows Kalin in this lap.
Yeah, I fully expect that we're going to see the majority of the field start to come down in the next 2 to 3 laps here.
Been a dominating performance so far for Richard Regan Jr. so far. Ever since he got the clean air, he hasn't looked back. His teammate hasn't been able to close up the gap quite much either yet, staying at about 2.3 seconds. Richard Regan Jr., keep in mind, has had some strong performances here in the past, including the last time the series came here at Homestead Miami Speedway, although it ended in a bit of a disaster, if I remember correctly, Christian, with lap traffic in that case for Regan Jr.
Yeah, he had a substantial lead, and he just got crossed up with a car that he was trying to get by to put a lap down, and unfortunately ended the race for himself, and really actually took him out of championship contention as well. So not great memories of this racetrack for him.
Going and staying out for another lap. Of note, you don't need to use the access road here for the past year or so. Chad Brown, who is having an okay race in the top 20, has elected to use the access road to pit. This is going to cost him some time.
Yeah, that's significant time loss because obviously you're running down there on the flats, tighter radius. It's a narrow strip of tarmac as well, so kind of a costly mistake, or maybe just forgetting that you don't need to use that access road for him right there.
Our pit stop coming this time by Trent Dinkle from 3rd position. And trying to take it nice and safe. Some drivers will send it all the way as hard as they can up to that commitment cone, if not to the first timing segment, Christian, and really lock up the brakes. I've seen a couple times this week drivers just driving to the barrels.
Yeah, it's very easy to do, and it's one of those things where when you see it happen, you're like, well, how do you end up doing that? And I mean, you're out there on old tires, and you're trying to get everything you can get. It's a lot harder to get a car to slow down and drop down onto the flat than it probably looks from the outside, and it's very, very easy to slide into the barrels. This track is pretty well known for that mistake happening in a similar sense, and so is Dover. You know, you see guys slide into the pit barrels, but Trent Dinkle there with a pretty conservative entry, I would say. Obviously he was down on the flat long before the end of the corner, so he's probably going to have lost a little bit of time.
He also came in pit. Also coming in for service, David Wilson Jr. He's now in the PPG racing machine. After having a solid first half of the run, dropped as far back as around the end of the top 15. Meanwhile, Abner Acosta, he is still under attack from several cars. He has dropped back to 7th spot currently on the racetrack. Calgill, despite the damage, is reeling him in at the moment by a couple tenths a lap.
Yeah, Acosta now almost 14 seconds off the lead, so it's really not worked out from this run. And as you say, even with the damage, Patrick Calgill's up there and challenging him, as is Charles Sumner as well.
Charles Sumner, who's up the road from these drivers. A little bit of rather behind the road from some of these drivers coming in. Calgill almost looked like he thought about coming in, but there are cars zipping their way to the outside. Danny Cervantes now with the pass. There's Sumner and the rest of those drivers now coming in from behind.
So a pretty aggressive pit entry there in the background, but made it happen, and that's kind of something that we're used to seeing, drivers locking up and really sliding up to the entrance cone.
That was Sumner, Michael Wick, Mike Knight coming in. Doug Evans also coming in. Meanwhile, Acosta having contact in turns 3 and 4 in the wall. Contact from Mark Kalin and several drivers on fresh tires who came up and quick, trying to use the top line.
Yeah, you saw Acosta running the top. He had Kalin right behind him on the entry, and I think Acosta just got in a little bit too fast, and Kalin was right behind him. Acosta pushed up in the late part of the corner, and if he did get in the wall, he only just touched it, so I don't expect that he's going to have any significant damage there.
Doesn't look to be any major damage. He got lucky if that was the case then. As Acosta really slowing it down, coming in this time by after that situation from 8th position. That lost him a spot to Danny Cervantes as well as a couple more seconds.
Yeah, and I'm surprised that we're seeing drivers kind of stretching out the stint as long as they are. It's well past the kind of the even third strategy. So it's, yeah, I'm genuinely surprised. I really thought that we would have seen everybody down pit road by now.
Out go several drivers. Evans losing time. He ended up getting caught for a speeding penalty. James Duke has also been caught for a speeding penalty throughout the sequence so far. O'Brien, Bisson Jr., Hawley, Daniels, and Harvey, though, are all in this time by, as well as Danny Cervantes and Brandon Walter. The only driver yet to pit is the race leader, Richard Regan Jr.
Yeah, I think what's been going on here is that Regan Jr. has just been kind of keeping everybody out there. Obviously, a lot of drivers are used to referencing off the leader as to when to pit, and everybody kind of just waiting as long as possible before pulling the trigger. And it's got to the point where there's more cars out there on fresh tires than there are old tires, and it's probably getting a little bit difficult for everybody to manage. And everybody kind of had a bit of a hive mind moment there where they all decided to pit, with the exception of Regan Jr., who's come down this time.
And he's in now to the pit box. Several drivers come out right along next to him. Brandon Walter actually jumped by Danny Cervantes in the pit stop sequence. No other drivers were caught speeding in that mixture of drivers who had pit. Off and away goes Richard Regan Jr. after his service. But one thing to note, Colton Lane, with his strategy, is currently now the race leader. Dinko has also jumped Regan Jr. in the pit stop sequence. Also, Mark Kalin is in 7th spot with his pit stop strategy. So several undercuts have worked out for major position changes for now.
Yeah, and that's the risk with running long. Obviously, we knew that Colton Lane was going for the very aggressive undercut strategy, which will come back to bite him if the race goes green to the end here. But even our drivers who were up inside the top 10, all waiting so long to come down, they have made themselves vulnerable to a caution here, because they're going to have to pass through quite a substantial amount of the field to get back into the positions that they were.
Right now, Lane is 1 second slower than Trent Dinkel at the moment, with 89 laps to go, currently approaching 20 laps this time by on his tires. But here's the thing. There are lap cars in between each of them at the moment. You have Jose Medina, who will now pass by Colton Lane, who was in between Dinkel. There was also, just moments ago, one car in between Regan Jr. and O'Brien. Chad Brown is that in particular car. Here's the gap now between first and second, about 9/10.
Yeah, it's obviously only a matter of time before Trent Dinkel takes over the lead, but Regan Jr. about 2.5 seconds back on Dinkel, so it'll be a while before he's back within kind of striking range of the lead.
Dinkel looking to lead some of the first laps of the day for him today. As sliding up the track goes Lane, to the race lead goes Dinkel, and he has it by about 1.7 seconds over Regan Jr. for now. Regan Jr. has also just passed by Chad Brown in lap traffic, so there's now clean space between him, Lane, and Dinkel for the attack, but traffic in front.
Yeah, and Dinkel actually kind of stopped around sort of the part of the race I was expecting, kind of almost at the splitting it evenly, so to speak. So he's on significantly older tires compared to Richard Regan Jr. He's actually on 7-lap older tires at this point.
And this is where the chess match almost is starting to break out here, Christian. These drivers thinking about the big picture and how much time they can pick up or separate potentially for the final stop, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, this is everybody's kind of locked in a way to their strategies. So for example, Colton Lane has got really no choice but to massively short pit again, and I imagine what his plan is going to be is as soon as he can make it to the end on fuel, that's going to be when he's coming down, because that's really the only play he's got. He's got no pace relative to the guys who pit recently, because he's on 18-lap older tires, so he's just going to fall back at this point. So he has to try and flip that around somehow, and that's really going to be his only play. It's a little bit different for guys like Trent Dinkel, who's offset to Richard Regan Jr. and James O'Brien, but it's still going to be the case that he's probably going to pit earlier than those guys, because if he kind of tries to work his way onto their strategy, it's only going to hurt him.
Should be worth noting that Bisson Jr. is flying. Also, flying on by for the race lead is Richard Regan Jr. Zoom on by in turn 3, and now Regan Jr. back up to the race lead already by 0.4 of a second. So you have Regan Jr., who is now quick at 32.1s. You also have Robert Bisson Jr., who is the second quickest car on the track, reeling in James O'Brien at the moment in a battle for third position that's starting to heat up.
Yeah, and Bisson Jr. is in amongst that group of the top 5 fastest cars out on the track, and has been pretty much since about lap 15 of the race. So his disadvantage has come entirely from starting in that 10th spot. If he hadn't started that far back, then he would have definitely been in contention for this race win.
So in other words, you're hoping for a caution flag, is what you're saying based on the time.
Yeah, I would definitely say that he is, and I'm kind of interested to see if he actually does have anything for Richard Regan Jr. at this point.
By the way, Colton Lane has been reeled in just about by a group that features Bradley Hawley and Adam Zemke, who is closing and separated by about 5 to 8 car lengths apiece. There's also a group of cars that is starting to shuffle a little bit. Mike Knight and Mark Halen have just changed for 9th position on one note around the track. The rest of the groupings have separated around 6, in some cases to about 0.6, and others to about 5 car lengths, such as here.
Yeah, there's a couple of drivers who have really been disadvantaged by the late pit strategy. So just looking at the board right now, we've got Pat Harvey and Joshua Daniels about there, and then 11th and 12th, and they've got a lot of cars to work their way through. They've got about a 10-lap advantage on tires compared with Mark Halen, and then around about a 3-lap advantage over Mike Knight and Charles Sumner ahead of them. So it's going to be a little bit difficult for those guys to kind of get their way back up towards the top 5.
Just seen Mark Halen slam into the wall and add a bit more damage to the number 62. It'd be last time by in turns 3 and 4, and on iRacing, it's very difficult to be able to ride the fence here.
Yeah, you can see him struggling with that car coming off of turn 2 this time by. It doesn't look like he solved his issues with the loose, and it looks like he's going to be struggling with that all the way to the end of the race.
Again, this is all live pictures at the moment that he ends up losing another spot here, but it can be tricky to run the wall. Was one of the main things. It's described almost as the cushion, as some drivers in the industry. It's more so used as a dirt racing term, but it is applicable here because you have to get within only a few millimeters of the wall to really utilize the speed that can be up against that wall with the side forces.
Yeah, you have to be very, very close to it for it to actually really be a significant help to you. Obviously, if you're about within half a car, you're going to start to feel it and start to pick it up a little bit. But as you say, it's almost the best way of thinking about how the wall works is in terms of kind of it's like ground effect, but on the side of the car. So you have a point where you're getting more and more and more and more up until the kind of the point where you're almost touching it and then you'll lose it all, and that's why you see guys hit it, because it builds and builds and builds and builds right up until the point where suddenly it all drops away, and that's why it's so difficult to do it. It's not an easy skill, and we don't see that many drivers who can run the wall effectively.
That's in real life as well as in the virtual side. It takes a lot of skill, to say the very least, to be able to run that line. Of note, Joshua Daniels has been able to run the bottom line to get around Mike Knight's top line behind here. Adam Zemke has also passed by Colton Lane this past lap by, to be able to get the 6th position. Zemke having a nice and quiet day today, but a solid performance. He's currently 5 seconds back in the next position for now.
Yeah, and he's probably not got a chance of getting any higher up because everybody ahead of him is either on equal or fresher tires. And he's got Pat Harvey behind him, who's probably going to run him down in a couple of laps as well, I think.
Meanwhile, Bisson Jr. has run down Dinkle to take away 3rd position. He's 5 seconds back to the race lead, but Bisson Jr., he is still flying around this circuit. When he's in clean air, he has race-leading pace.
It's taken us a little bit of time, but we've now cycled, I think, the 3 best cars to the front of the field, and everybody very, very evenly matched here. Just unfortunately, all about 2.6 seconds apart. So unfortunate that we're probably not going to see a battle between these guys. But maybe if there's a little bit of kind of checkup with lap cars or whatnot to kind of bring the leaders back in, we might see some interesting strategy going on around in the final pit stop.
Keep in mind that the teammate to Robert Bisson Jr., Pat Harvey, is coming in fairly quickly for 6th position. This is Adam Zemke's trying to reel in still. And look at how Harvey's just been able to stick that seam throughout the day.
Yeah, and I'm really surprised actually that we're seeing so many drivers able to run not quite the very bottom of the track, but they're all kind of dipping under it when they're trying to make some passes. And it's kind of lower grip down there, so it's interesting that we see some cars able to really make that work. Obviously, Pat Harvey is one of them, and having a tire advantage makes it easier, but it's still challenging to make a pass down there.
It can be, absolutely, but for Pat Harvey, see the time differential, at least a couple tenths difference last time by. Only a little bit quicker last time by in open space. He's currently running on his own in turn 3 compared to Harvey. Just to get around Chad Brown, who is feeding some dirty air as lap traffic here, who goes up to the top line to let him go.
Yeah, so now inside the top 5, everybody with the exception of Trent Dinkle is on the same tire strategy. Everybody pitted about 18 to 19 laps ago. Trent Dinkle has a 5 to 6 lap tire disadvantage.
Here's an interesting one. Colton Lane is coming into pit, but Christian, this is outside the window to make it on gas.
Yeah, that's 72 laps, and you can't do that. So I'm not really sure why he's come down this early. I'm guessing that he's fully betting on a late race caution, say with about 10 laps to go, just in the hope that he's going to get some track position, because you can't get to the end from here.
This is an intriguing strategy call, but the main thing I'm thinking about when it comes to this is, do you think he's trying to utilize all the tire sets and hoping that the fall off makes the big difference for some valuable points here?
I mean, it's possible, but I think he would have had to be more aggressive with his strategy to really take full advantage of that.
Look at this right in front of him, though. Welcome down to the pit lane where they're all trying to run the wall and sliding up. Colton Lane charges his way to the bottom, and James Duke came down and right across the 60. James Duke made contact with Colton Lane out of all of that as he came down the racetrack and he wanted a pit.
Yeah, and obviously that's an issue that you can run into when you got guys out there on brand new fresh tires. You see Duke kind of grabbed the apron there and really washed up bad, was then way up the racetrack and trying to come down, and Colton Lane just avoided wiping him out completely right there.
A very weird scenario and situation there for James Duke, but he's off and away in the pit lane. I believe Colton Lane may have got some damage from that. Yes, He does have a bit on the right side of the race car. Particularly, you'll see it just a bit towards the back end.
Yeah, not too surprising that he was clipped just a little bit, but definitely fortunate that it wasn't much worse. Obviously, it was a massive speed differential between the two cars right there.
An incredible scenario. Meanwhile, Joshua Daniels has passed by Adam Zemke now. Charles Sumner has also been reeled in amongst this grouping. Now here comes the defense. Zemke to the top side of the racetrack there. Don't think he's going to be able to hold on to it though. Daniels looks like he's got the move completely covered off on the exit. I have seen the top line work of No Christian if you're close enough in 1 and 2. And that's an art to it itself as well, to be able to get enough of a run to be able to properly utilize that line. Yeah, that's the real advantage of the top line is the run that you get on corner exit. So if you catch somebody who you're significantly faster than and you can't get by them on the bottom, it's definitely possible for you to kind of wind the car up running the top just so that you can kind of throw it to their inside in 3 and 4 to try and get the pass done. Haven't seen too much of that tonight of note, but become a bit of a hornet's nest of drivers behind them. You have Chad Brown, you have Mike Knight, you have Danny Cervantes among these drivers. You also have Calgill mixed in, and don't forget you have Colton Lane, who just zipped its way on through all this. So you have a mix of lead lap cars fighting for position, lap down cars, and the traffic playing a factor here. Yeah, we got Mike Knight and Danny Cervantes having their own battle here as they pass by Chad Brown. All in amongst that, we had Colton Lane trying to make his strategy work, so we're 4 wide for a split second there. Indeed. Side by side now for position. This is 11th spot. Danny Cervantes in the Domino's machine able to stick it on the seam and make the move. Mike Knight gives him the space. Yeah, Mike Knight just struggling a little bit with the rear end of the car right now. It looks like he just can't get off the corner the way he would have wanted to. And right there, he went to the top side, but he was really loose right as Danny Cervantes was passing him. So I think he really had no opportunity to kind of fight that move even if he wanted to. Zemke, meanwhile, is under attack now from Charles Sumner for 8th position. So after gaining some time, Zemke is losing the time back. He has a 3-lap difference on the tires between Sumner and Zemke. Now you see that difference. The pace is worth about 0.2 of a second. Yeah, Sumner having a really solid run right here. He started in 7th, now up into 8th. So he's kind of stayed around the same point, but that doesn't really reflect in terms of how solid a driver's been, because we've had a lot of drivers come from the back of the field and who've moved way up. So he's really holding position, and actually he's kind of at a net gain, really. Yeah, he is at this point. For Charles Sumner, is -1 from his starting position, but he had dropped back to the teens at one point in this race. Meanwhile, drivers who both have damage, Walter and Calgill, now scrapping for 13th position. They are also trying to reel in Mike Knight. And when you battle like this, it can cost you some time running side by side like that. Yeah, Walter with a slight tire advantage, only 2 laps though, so not a massive advantage. Not like he's got 5-lap pressures, so it is a genuine battle that we've got right here. And obviously just ahead of them, we've got Mike Knight, who's starting to struggle just a little bit, so these two can see that happening up ahead of them whilst they're having their own fight right here. Bit of a drift that time out of turn 2 for Calgill. A little bit of excitement over the radio from the 31 machine. He's now slipped and slid his way to 14th position. Yeah, what I'm noticing actually is we've got a lot of guys out there who are struggling with loose, but I don't really see anybody noticeably struggling with tight. The only car that maybe looks a little bit that way is Abner Acosta. He just doesn't look like he can rotate through the center of the corner maybe as well as he would like. And at the moment, he's got a 5-lap tire advantage over Zemke ahead of him, but it's taken him quite a while to kind of run these guys down. And he's actually not that much faster than Zemke. Zemke last time ran a 34 flat, and Acosta ran a 33.9. For some context, the leaders who are on a very similar tire strategy to Acosta, so Richie Ricky Jr., ran a 33.6, so he's significantly off their pace. just tell with the way he's steering that it's fairly stiff in how he's rotating this car. Like, take a look at the steering angle.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see here, he just winds more and more in, all the way past center, and it just doesn't look like it responds for him. So that's going to be a pretty frustrating car to drive around this racetrack. And you see drivers struggling with loose, but it's preferable to be loose around here because at least you can then rotate. You know, you can. I mean, we see him here. That dipping under that into the very bottom lane right there. He should have been really loose on exit, but he just wasn't. So I can only think he's definitely struggling with tight.
Should be worth noting that when it comes to Richard Regan Jr., the gap is down to 2.2 seconds between him and O'Brien. You see those lap times between Acosta and Regan Jr. Well, Regan Jr. is currently on average up to 0.3 a lap quicker each time around. Picked up an error, just lost 0.3 in fact, because Richard Regan Jr. had to deal with lap traffic of James Dewar and Mark Kalin.
Yeah, we're coming down to that point where these guys are going to have to make that last pit stop pretty short. And this is probably going to be make or break really for this top three. I think all of them are within a shot of this. I think Diesel Jr. is just a little bit too far back. I think Trent Dinkle has fallen away from this fight. Obviously, he made a play for the short pit, and it just hasn't come off for him. He's now 9 seconds off the lead, and he's got Bradley Holly only 1 second behind him. So he's got to worry about trying to hold on to that fourth spot. But I think there's a possibility for either O'Brien or Biso Jr. to kind of pull something off here against Richard Regan Jr. But I've got to think that Regan Jr.'s probably got a bit more pace than he's showing us right now. He's kind of been cruising since he got the lead.
Especially with Henley's run throughout the day of note. Patrick Calgio has pit. He's in and out already for service. That makes it a near 60-lap run for Calgio to get to the end of this race. 57 and 56 laps to go this time by. As the lap time's a little bit quicker for O'Brien this time compared to Regan Jr. by about a couple 100ths. Bisson Jr. matched the time to Regan Jr.
Yeah, it's really just a case for this top three to try and get closer to each other. Obviously, for Regan Jr., he wants to extend the gap, but for there really to be options that might work for O'Brien and Biso Jr., they do have to push this next 5 to 10 laps to try and close this gap down, just so that they have kind of a chance against Richard Regan Jr. To just come out a little bit closer and maybe be able to make something happen.
Tight battles on the track include Charles Sumner, Adam Zemke, Abner Acosta, Danny Cervantes, who are all separated by about 2 seconds. Brandon Walter and Mike Knight are separated by half a second. Wilson Jr. and Witt separated by 1 second. Here is Zemke in particular, who is just hanging on to the draft of Sumner, but Acosta is now within 0.6. We talked about the tightness from before. That's usually around that buffer point where the dirty air really settles on in.
Yeah, and this is kind of the point of the run where I was talking about a little bit earlier on, about how the dirty air effect actually becomes perceptibly worse the longer the run goes on. And obviously we're coming to the end of the second run. Everybody's about 35 to 40 laps in on tires. So that's why we're kind of seeing everybody start to string out a little bit. It just gets harder and harder to follow people. But the driver who's, I think, actually under threat here, obviously we talked about Acosta trying to move up to Zemke, but he's got Cervantes all over his rear bumper right now.
Yes, indeed he does. Cervantes now within about a 10th as a bit of a scrape to the wall for Acosta, in fact, for the right rear quarter panel. Acosta sliding up the racetrack as well as Cervantes trying to get the arc to get underneath. Can't quite get there yet.
Yeah, and he's just got to get to that left rear, because as soon as he can get the nose inside of Acosta, then the advantage is switching to him, and he's there. So he's now going to be able to pull this pass off, I think, relatively easily. You can see the 25 all throughout the corner with just the advantage. Acosta's going to maybe have a little bit of a run, but he's to the outside. It's really difficult to make anything happen, and we've seen how tight his car is. I think it's a done deal for Cervantes here.
Adam Zemke coming in this time by has elected to pit out of this battle. So Acosta dropping back now to currently 10th position. Zemke now opens up the pit window for the top 10 drivers.
Yeah, good pit entry actually there by Adam Zemke. able to get down before that battle got to him, and came off the corner and really got it slowed down without kind of having to get down onto the flat real early on. So good job.
Bisson Jr. meanwhile was also coming as well. Probably Holly will be one of the drivers who drive on by with a quiet race, but Bisson Jr. tried to send it a little more aggressive this time compared to the last time.
Yeah, so Bisson Jr. here making a play to try and win this race. Obviously looking at a 50-lap run to the end here. A touch on the long side, but we did see these drivers run out to about 50 to 53 even on the first run. So definitely they know what their cars are going to do. But certainly interesting to kind of make this play, because if it doesn't work, and say he comes out behind Richard Regan Jr. and James O'Brien still, if they try and cover him off, or we run a couple of laps and they pit and he's then offset kind of to the bad in terms of tires, he's locked into that situation. He's knowingly not going to gain any further spots, and he's actually going to be on the defensive from that side, as we've seen from Trent Dinkel.
Now falling within 1 second of Hawley, as you've seen there. Hawley having to go up the racetrack though to let by Bisson Jr. Bisson Jr. that time with a big run, actually I think got in the back of Hawley.
Yeah, that's the danger with guys on new tires. And obviously you see the speed differential is just massive.
Gonna take a look. You'll see he's out of the pit lane, and then Hawley tries to arc it down in front of him, and then hello.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit optimistic of Bradley Hawley right there, to think that Bisson Jr. wasn't going to be able to just kind of roll up on him. But at the same time, it might have been avoidable if Bisson Jr. had taken all the way down to the white line there, which might have been what Hawley was expecting him to do.
Both of them do have damage now as a result of that, though. Front nose damage for Bisson Jr., back end damage for Hawley. So that is going to impact both of the races the rest of the way, as both of them have been top 5 cars throughout the night. Of note, Acosta is still under attack. Brandon Walter is now looking to try and pass him.
Yeah, we see James Duke there trying to get a lap back and not quite able to pull off the move, but all the while Walter is behind and sees the opportunity to get to the inside of Acosta here. Not quite able to do it on entry, but looks like he might be there on exit.
Not able to get the run though quite yet, as now dirty air being given to Acosta for the back end of the 76. Looking like Walter trying to just set things up nice and calm to be able to make the move.
Yeah, this is extremely costly for Acosta right here. Obviously struggling with tight. Then to have a car sitting on your nose is only going to exacerbate that problem. And Walter's just looking for the opportunity. Acosta desperate to get some clean air right there.
Diving right back underneath Duke as Walter takes advantage. Brandon Walter drives away on the high side, and that means another spot lost for our pole sitter. Trent Dinkel has indicated as well he's coming in this time buying the 501 with 45 laps to go. It's going to be intriguing how this strategy plays out. He dropped back to about 12 seconds behind Regan Jr. at the end of this strat.
Yeah, so he's definitely out of contention to win this race, but he's really fighting against Bradley Hawley and Pat Harvey at this point. You see Harvey coming down with him, committing to this same strategy and betting on being able to beat him on raw pace.
Pat Harvey doing a solid job, as we've talked about all night long, to be able to drive his way into a potential possibility to fight maybe for the top 5. See how it plays out in the final few laps of this race, as off and away as well goes Wilson Jr. So far, no speeding penalties this service so far. James Dewar is also coming this time by. James Dewar having an up and down season, as we talked about. A rough race tonight for him. Also, Danny Cervantes will come in this time by in the 25 machine.
Yeah, see Cervantes just ducking down at the pit road there. Good entry by him.
Nice and smooth, and that's also going to mean the race leader is in. Richard Regan Jr. coming in. Bradley Hawley is also in the pit lane. James O'Brien following his teammate in as well.
Yeah, so no offset strategy for O'Brien. He's going to have to beat Regan Jr. on raw pace if he's going to do it.
And O'Brien had lost 2 seconds, keep in mind, in dirty air and lap traffic in about 5 to 10 laps. So he lost time that was so valuable for this point of the race.
Yeah, and it's very, very easy to do. Obviously, as you say, the worst time to lose time is coming up to a pit cycle, because you lose any advantage or any possibility even to kind of leapfrog guys who are making pit stops around your time, or maybe even just to try and get a little bit of a defensive play against guys who've tried to undercut you. So, yeah, not what he would have wanted.
And on top of things, you see O'Brien lost time in pit stop sequence. How about nearly a full second in the lane?
Yeah, and some of that is obviously some of the pit stop time itself, but some of that as well is going to be the entry and the exit from the pit road itself, in terms of getting down to the speed for the cone.
Current race leader, though, at the moment, as a result of these pit stops, is Mike Knight, but that is going to change because Robert Bisson Jr., remember his 9 to 8 lap undercut, is coming up and quick as well. Knight is moving up the racetrack to let by all the drivers with fresher tires go. Knight is yet to pit for his final stop.
Yeah, we've got 2 drivers out on track right now who've got very old tires. Mike Knight has completed 53 laps on his set. The only other driver out there who's been out for the longer time is actually Mark Kalin, who's been struggling with that loose car. He's been out on his tires for 60 laps.
It stayed loose. Keep in mind, throughout this entire run, is now in your race lead is Bisson Jr. Here's Kalin. He continues to have the same situations. I've seen him sideways at least 4 or 5 times this run.
Yeah, and obviously not a particularly fast run, but got to give him credit for being able to hold on to that car for that long, because I can't imagine it's gotten any better over the course of the run.
Right now, the furthest you can go is about 66, 67 laps or so, depending on how much you use the throttle on these types of laps here on this racetrack. Has some open space this time to potentially try and duck down. He has meanwhile, take a look at Bradley Hawley. He has now been able to pull up in front of Colton Lane. Colton Lane, keep in mind, in alternate strategy, is in 6th position.
Yeah, and Colton Lane's in trouble here because he's been out on his tire set for 33 laps already, and he's already being passed by guys who've made their final pit stop. So he can't make it to the end of the race on fuel, and he's already essentially a pit stop behind, and it's only going to get worse from him. So he's desperate for a caution. That's the only play he has left.
Yeah, this is going to be extremely difficult for him at this point. Should be worth noting that Mark Kalin just attempted to pit from the 3rd and 4th line. Yes, you heard that right. Mark Kalin indicating he's coming in this time by. Last time he tried to pit from the wall and nearly drove it into the barrels.
And you can see how difficult it is to get that car down to pit road speed, and he's able to do it this time. That was a 63-lap run for Mark Kalin.
Going to have some of the freshest tires on the racetrack, but the race lead is on. Richard Regan Jr. looking to take it back, and does, from Robert Bisson Jr.
Yeah, and that right there is kind of what I was talking about with making that decision to short pit. And if it doesn't come off, it's just sealed your fate. So right here, obviously Bisson Jr. did have the lead for a couple of laps, but because Richard Regan Jr. was able to catch him so quickly and overhaul him already, and now has a tire advantage, it's really sealed Bisson Jr.'s fate. Even though he had the pace earlier in the race, as we talked about, there's no chance for him right now. There's no way he's going to catch Richard Regan Jr. back.
Regan Jr. now leads by more than a second. His teammate James O'Brien, and your champion for this season, is 5 seconds behind. Bradley Hawley is 13 seconds back. Trent Dinkle is 14 seconds behind to round out your top 5 intervals. Of note, Colton Lane has come into pit for his final set of tires. So the 60 has backed out of his strategy call. With 35 to go, again, he had to come in. He was not going to make it on the gas.
Yeah, and he's absolutely doubling down on this right now, because he's going to lose a lap. He's going to have to somehow get that back, and now he doesn't have a set of tires left if we see a late race yellow. So he's got to hope it stays green, and he's just got to try and salvage what he can.
Give him credit. He tried something different, And sometimes you have to do that, but this is a type of different we normally don't see at Homestead Miami Speedway.
Yeah, obviously very aggressive right from the beginning of the race in terms of strategy. It just hasn't worked out for him. It is typical that these days we do kind of see the optimum strategy be the one with the least number of pit stops, just because the tire fall off really kind of plateaus and you kind of stop losing pace. Whereas in the past it was quite a bit more linear, and a strategy like he's taken here might have been not necessarily 100% viable, but just, you know, a little bit more viable than it is today.
He was racing Bisson Jr., Mike Knight, Brandon Walter, Pat Harvey amongst those drivers for positions in the top 10 of the standings. But for Bisson Jr., he's already lost 4 seconds to Richard Regan Jr. to the point where James O'Brien is already within his draft.
Yeah, so at this point, he's pretty much certain to lose this second spot to O'Brien, and then that's really going to seal it up for the team hype cars, because they're going to have the 1-2 and the freshest tires on track. So they've executed the race perfectly, but for Bisson Jr., he's got to then start looking further back to Holly and Trent Dinkle and even Pat Harvey, who are all kind of grouped up and in with a chance of taking that third spot away from him.
So, James O'Brien now up to second position. Keep in mind that Bradley Hawley is still about 9 seconds behind all of this. Can Bradley Hawley get to Bisson Jr.?
I definitely think that it's possible. I think if he has a clean run here, doesn't get held up by a lot of lap cars, I think he could get there.
He does have James Stewart to try and get around first. Lap traffic. Meanwhile, Charles Sumner has a bit of a fight with Patrick Calgill, also having to let by several fresh tire cars. A couple laps ago, Colton Lane had a bit of a moment trying to go very low on the racetrack and drifted his way past these cars before letting Sumner back go.
Yeah, and it's a legit fight for the back end of the top 10 here between Sumner and Calgill. So.
Oh, and Kalen, another moment. Take a look as he just about turned around the 98.
Yeah, you see Kalen driving in on the bottom here, on the very, very bottom groove. And just starting to come up a little bit on exit, gets really close to the back end of the 98 of Sumner and tries to back out of it, does so successfully, but nearly loses his own car in the process.
Kalen Curley in 19th position. 1 lap down your current lucky dog, Brandon Walter. For reference sake, Acosta is currently the last car in the lead lap in 12th spot. Patrick Calgill now dropping back 11. Keep in mind, that's been how quick the pace has been tonight, to the point where Regan Jr. can lap his way inside the top 10, if not even higher.
Yeah, it is definitely looking like that's going to be possible. Right now, Charles Sumner is 29.5 seconds off the lead, so not too far away from going a lap down, and then that will be everybody outside of the top 10 and 10 points a lap down.
Keep in mind that up the road from these guys, they have Abner Acosta reeling in Patrick Calgill. Yet again, Calgill is currently struggling in his yellow machine. Here's a look here is on board as Acosta making the move for 11th position.
Yeah, really just a recovery drive at this point for Acosta. Obviously making that pass pretty easily. He's got almost half the number of laps on his tires as Calgill. Calgill's at 31 laps on his tires to Acosta's 15.
So the strategy call just seems to have not worked out for Calgill. That Calgill up to the wall to let by Richard Regan go. So now the field up to 12 is now 1 lap down to the race leader.
Yeah, we got a couple of guys actually inside the top 10 who are probably going to start falling backwards. Obviously, Bisson Jr. has some pretty old tires relative to the guys around him. He's been out on his for 24 laps, so there's a probability he's going to start sliding back towards Holly Dinkle and Harvey, which we've talked about. But then behind him, in 7th place, we got Adam Zemke, who's been out on his tires for 25 laps, and Joshua Daniels behind him, having a quiet race, I would have to say. Has only been on his for 16 laps, so I imagine he's going to be able to close that gap down and take that 7th spot away.
Kalen is right underneath him, so this is going to lose Josh Daniels potentially a little bit of time for the time being. And Daniels way up the racetrack as a result of that. Way too up high.
Yeah, definitely went higher than necessary, I would describe, to let Mark Kalen by there. But Kalen trying to recover here and trying to salvage something from this race. And right now running 19th, on the verge of going 2 laps down.
24 laps to go for some of these drivers this time by what has been a dominated race from Richard Regan Jr. Richard Regan Jr. coming up to 23 to go this time by for him. The pace has been blistering quick. It's been up there with the best of the best all week, especially with these hot temperatures. It's been impressive, to say the very least, what we've seen from the private label Team Hype cars tonight.
Yeah, and it's actually been a little bit surprising this season. Obviously moved to open setups. It looked like it kind of really went against Richard Regan Jr., especially for the first half of the campaign. But now that they're getting a handle on it and kind of back to what we've seen for the vast majority of 2020, it has to be said, where Richard Regan Jr. would just qualify on the pole and kind of drive away with races. And I think he's got to be happy that that's kind of moved back that way, and obviously away from kind of not finishing races or just kind of struggling to get long run performance out of the car. And I think these guys have really turned a corner with that. And obviously O'Brien, through consistency, was able to take the championship too.
Some of their team focus is going towards the open wheel side as well to try and perform on that side. So it's an organization that, on top of things, where it's represented on the road course side as well in the IMSA Pro Series back just a couple months ago. So their organization as a whole is one that has really impressed me so far in 2021, with a lot of work being put in to grow this organization.
Yeah, a lot of depth in the organization, and obviously when it comes to, say, fixed setup racing, it's kind of not an easy way, because obviously you still have to perform, you still have to win races and whatnot. But it's a bit easier to get started, I think, is the best way of putting it. And obviously then moving towards everything kind of being open setup is a huge challenge, and to be able to do it successfully is absolutely not easy. It's not something that we really see many organizations able to do. Obviously we see quite a lot of super teams, so to speak, kind of spanning the World Championship level series, and the reason for that is just because it's so difficult to do with a small group of guys, and having strength and depth is absolutely necessary for success in top level series.
Of course, this organization, on top of things, has discussed going to the Lionheart IndyCar Series to contend for a team championship there. That's with Connor Harrington, who is top 5 in the Drivers' Championship in 2020 for that season. Joshua Chin, who is the Rookie of the Year in 2020 and 3rd in the championship, and a new rookie in Jason Brookie. So, some big things coming up for this organization. Also, there is the opportunity for many drivers to be able to have a chance to compete next season. PRL Cup Series signups are open for 2021 Season 2. For more information, go to the PrecisionRacingLeague.com. That's PrecisionRacingLeague.com to be able to learn more. It is also in the description to the YouTube version of this broadcast for tonight's action, and already a few drivers looking to make their season debuts upcoming, or looking to show what they can do in the Cup cars on top of things. Meanwhile, Adam Zemke and Joshua Daniels starting to close up. Keep in mind, Daniels on those fresher tires has been closing in by about 3 to 4 tenths a lap.
Yeah, in the moment we got Mark Kalen in between this pair, kind of making it a little bit difficult. It has to be said for Joshua Daniels to close this gap up, and you see Kalen running the top there. That's going to help Daniels just a little bit, but realistically, it kind of needs Kalen to kind of help Daniels out and just let him by, which looks like he might be on the verge of doing, to really allow him to have that opportunity. You see that duck to the inside.
Not wanting to be a factor in this battle, it appears, here in turns 3 and 4. And a good race overall, I'd have to say, for Joshua Daniels. As you said, quiet but solid.
Yeah, I think he's going to be disappointed to not be up in the top 5 here. Obviously, he's ran within the top 5 very, very consistently. So, really where we want to be, say, fighting for 7th spot. But it has been a very solid race. You know, it's obviously
trouble! Mark Kalin back straight away. He nearly ranked it inside the inside wall. Was able to keep it off the fence. We stay green with 16 to go this time.
Absolutely a race to forget for Mark Kalin.
Absolutely loose moment here for Kalin. He's had several times where he's nearly done this. This time was the biggest moment of the race.
Yeah, you see here it starts to get away from him right from the mid corner, and you can see it's really going around and does a good job of getting it gathered up. For a long time, the backstretch was all grass, and I think that now it's paved. That really kind of saved him from ending up into the inside wall there.
See, they've now closed up as that all broke down as Daniels to the inside. This is for 7th spot. Daniels again making that look easy with the fresher tires and the better grip. 2/10 quicker last time by. Oh, look at this though. Zemke not giving up. He gives him the space for the run back on the high side.
Yeah, it looked like Daniels just got a little bit tight then coming up to the exit, but he's going to be able to get it done on the exit of 4 for sure here.
14 laps to go for these drivers this time by. They are within range to potentially be lapped here of note. Charles Sumner is now the last car on the lead lap, 32 seconds behind your race leader. Let's take a look at what's going on for some of the drivers that are battling for the lucky dog at the moment. Acosta and Brandon Walter are currently battling for that spot at the moment.
Yeah, and what a kind of change around really for Acosta. Obviously took the pole, pulled away the first 2 laps, and now fighting for the lucky dog towards the end of the race. So he's got a little bit of work to be done, I would say, in terms of long run performance on that car.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what happens in season 2 to see the progress from that organization and from him.
Are able to really get close to the rear bumper of Acosta, so looks like he's definitely got the advantage with him right now, but not quite able to get alongside him. Obviously there, Acosta left the inside open, which is great for the following car, because you can just duck to the inside and have completely clear air almost. So probably not really what Acosta needs to be doing if he wants to try and hold on to this spot.
Trying to poke to the high side, not able to get the run this time. Coming up to the final few laps in this race, as Walter now trying to back things up, it looks like, to try and get a run.
Yeah, I think actually his best opportunity was when Acosta kind of forgot to cover the bottom, but Mark Kalin is ahead of him and kind of slow right now, so this might present an opportunity again for Walter.
Mark Kalin drifting his way to the top line to let these drivers go. Walter has just seemed to struggle on corner exit in some of these battles today.
Yeah, wicked save from Kalin right there. That was completely out of shape coming off of 2, and it went back on him once, it went back on him twice, and eventually he got that gathered up.
I don't know how he's holding on to this car.
I definitely don't think he's going to be keeping this setup in his notes after this race.
I think he joked on the radio a little while ago saying Formula Drift while he's drifting to the bottom of the racetrack. By the way, the position battle has stayed single file for now, with Walter trying to find some clean air.
Yeah, Walter had the bottom open for just a split second again right there, but not able to make it work. Acosta gonna be a little bit tight right there. That's going to give him an opportunity again for running to turn 1, but he's got to get to the left rear quarter of Acosta to really get command of the corner, and he's just not able to do that.
And that's just the tricky thing when it comes to the dirty air too, is you think you've got to run, then bam, you get into the dirty air. That air sends you slipping and sliding a little bit off the corner. It sends you up towards the wall where you're forced to lift.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why it's imperative to kind of just creep up on it and not try and get too much too soon, because you'll end up losing more than you've gained in the past 4 to 5 laps if you kind of try to push it and close the gap too quickly.
Under 7 laps to go as what a send into the corner from Walter.
Yeah, nearly got to the outside there. I'm not sure he would have been able to do anything with that when he got down to turn 3 here, but you see he definitely wants that position bad. Obviously, having that lucky dog spot in the case of a late race yellow is just massive. You've got to try and get it.
See Acosta though with the cleaner air, able to get the runs off the corners. They do have Charles Sumner, who is also now a lap down, who is slowly dropping back to these cars as well as a bit of contact. Walter hit the back bumper of Acosta on that send.
Yeah, and trying to cross him over, I think, there, but just got way too close and about turned Acosta around on the entry of 1.
No damage. They stay clean. 5 to go this time. Meanwhile, Richard Regan Jr. continues to lead, still by 7.3 seconds over his teammate James O'Brien. It's been domination ever since Regan Jr. found clean air in his car, and now it's a matter of just getting this to the checkered flag with no trouble with the traffic.
Yeah, it's absolutely no threat at all. As you say, 7.4 now seconds out front ahead of James O'Brien, his teammate, who's kind of back there in no man's land in second, not under any threat himself.
Should be worth noting that Mark Halen ended up pitting for tires. You can guess why after his slides. Meanwhile, this battle's still heating up. This is still for 11th position. Walter over the back bumper of Acosta.
Yeah, Walter really wants the spot, but I'm wondering if he knows that it's no longer the lucky dog position.
I'm sure they realize that, but it's still points on the line. Walter, though, with the send. Looking to get clear this time. Trying to keep it really low, giving a ton of space to Acosta on the run off the corner.
Yeah, I think this time he's got it, though, because he's got to the left rear. Acosta's going to have to run the top, and we know he's not that strong up there. And Walter is completely clear here and now can drift up and finally takes that spot.
Brandon Walter now up one more spot as we take a look as Adam Zemke has been reeled in by Danny Cervantes for the last cars on the lead lap. They're coming to 3 to go right now. All while the leader is coming for 2 to go. One car ducks way hard out of the way in Chad Brown to move out of the way of the pack as Mark Halen's fresh tires go to the outside.
Yeah, Cervantes trying to get past Zemke here. He's got an 8-lap tire advantage, so it is heavily stacked in his favor, but he does have to get it done, and it's not looking easy with 3 to go.
Cervantes poking his way to the quarter panel. It's the closing laps. And the last cars in the lead lap here scrapping. Cervantes clear for 8th position.
And I think Zemke's going to be able to get anything back, but it doesn't look like he's going to try. He's going to go to the inside of Cervantes here. I have to see if Cervantes has got the grip on the top line.
They're going to have a full lap and a half plus to go, but the white flag is out for the race leader just behind him. Richard Regan Jr. has dominated much of the night tonight for private label Team Hype. This will add to what's been a storybook season for this organization on the team front. Richard Regan Jr. will find his way back to victory lane. He wins in Homestead. He's your winner at Homestead, Miami Speedway. And for James O'Brien, he is your 2021 Season 1 PRL Cup Series champion. Besant Jr. will come home in 3rd, with Bradley Hawley coming home in 4th. Trent Dinkle with the top 5. Danny Cervantes has been able to pull away by 10 car lengths to secure 8th position. Daniels will finish in front of them, and the last cars on the lead lap. But celebration time is all set to go for private label Team Hype. They are in contention mathematically to clinch the team championship tonight. And of course, James O'Brien with the Drivers' Championship, the organization ready to celebrate.
Yeah, textbook performance from them tonight, obviously getting it done with both the championship and the race win.
And the whole team will burn things down to the front stretch together. Overall, private label Team Hype combined for 5 victories on the campaign. As well, they finish with 2 drivers in the top 5, and Brandon Walter just shy of a top 10 to add to the totals. Post-race coverage coming up in just a few moments. You're watching the Global Sim Racing channel for the virtual Homestead Miami Speedway. Welcome back for post-race coverage of the PRL Cup Series in what was a dominant affair for Richard Regan Jr. and a strong conclusion to a championship run for James O'Brien. They finished 1-2 today, separated by 6.5 seconds on the stopwatch. Robert Bisson Jr. was able to hold on to third position by about 1.5 seconds over Bradley Hawley, while Trent Dinkle and Pat Harvey rounded up the top 6. Joshua Daniels, Danny Cervantes, Adam Zemke, and Charles Sumner were your top 10.
Brandon Walter we saw come out on top in that battle, comes home in 11th. Abner Acosta fell all the way from the pole down to 12th by the flag. Mike Knight and David Wilson Jr. Wilson Jr., another driver who started up in the top 5 and fell back to 14th. With Patrick Cowgill, saw him get into the wall a little bit early on in the race, comes home in 15th, and Michael Witt alongside him in 16th. Then we had Colton Lane, James Zert, Jose Medina, and Mark Kalin with that extremely loose car rounding out the top 20.
21st spot went to Chad Brown, 4 laps down. Baron Hilton, 5 laps down in 22nd. James Duke finished in 23rd, while Doug Evans rounded out the field. He DNF'd early, 94 laps down in this race in the 41 machine. But in the end, Richard Regan Jr. comes away with the victory tonight for private label Team Hype. For Regan Jr., it ends up being his 4th victory of the season. Richard, how are you feeling about your run tonight?
Feeling pretty good.
How so?
Well, I didn't have much time to help out with James and Brandon this week. And when I got in the room for practice, the first thing James says to me was, "We're in trouble. We're not that fast." So we threw some things at the car, and it worked out pretty good. So me, James, and Brandon feeling pretty good about this.
Absolutely. Of course, a strong performance for you and a strong team performance as talked about. This, of course, mathematically believe will end up getting you the team championship. Talk about the work put in throughout this entire season to make sure that your organization, once again, were team champions.
Well, the majority of the work was actually put in by James and Brandon. James puts in the most laps every week. I'm here when I can be. I've been pretty busy this past month and a half. And I actually missed a few races. And, when I was out, Brandon, he stepped up to the plate and got us those points we needed, and as well as James. James has been very consistent this season. So, I was just here to run, but they did the majority of the work. So most of the credit should go to them.
Right, they will bring in Walter and O'Brien in just a moment as well. But are you planning to run next season? And if so, what's your approach going to be for season 2?
Definitely running next season. We're staying open setup, so it's great to see the work that we've how far we've came since Atlanta. The beginning of the season was not good for us. Every week you can see us getting more confident building these sets and tweaking on the sets. Reaper Speed Lab gives us the base, and we tweak them throughout the week. We got Tommy Milner, Connor Harrington, Ty Stover. They're all run laps, give us feedback when they can. James, like I said, he's a machine. He just runs laps all week, and then I jump in the car, and I'm a little bit better telling James what the car should do. And usually the last a day or two before the race is when we really get the car dialed in, and then we just come out here and have some fun.
Anyone else you want to thank for your run then on that note for tonight?
Yeah, Brandon Walter, James O'Brien, Ty Stover, Tommy Milner, Private Label Epica, Susan G. Coleman, Multiple Sclerosis Society, Neonism Paints, Private Label Team Hype, and everyone that watches. Oh, and Oculus Classes, sorry.
Congratulations on the win tonight, and your teammates have now joined us as well. James O'Brien, the season champion. Brandon Walter also joining in. Oh boy, indeed, James. You are 2021 Season 1 champion. How does it feel to be a champion?
It's good to be back. Ever since that little guy Richard joined up, it's been a lot more of a challenge, but it's a lot easier when he's on my side now instead of against me. We can really work together and get a lot of things done. I think we're tied now, 3 each for PRL. I think that's what he said, so yeah, it's awesome. If I could have this season every season, top 5 every single race, I don't need to win the race every time. As long as I keep the nose clean and just bring it home in one piece, I'm good with that.
It was talked about by James, or rather by Richard, about the work you and Brandon put in each week. How is it like trying to log laps, try and help improve the speed in these cars each week for these races?
It's definitely a challenge. I'm learning a lot. I don't know terribly too much about them. We get a pretty decent base from Reaper Speed Lab. And I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's a good base. I don't expect to dominate with it, but it leads us in the right direction. And all week I am trying to turn laps. I'm pretty blessed that I can make my own schedule for work, and I usually have some pretty good free time. So I don't necessarily do a lot of races during the week, but I try and emulate the races during the week and see what some of the faster drivers are running. Like I'll go watch Coke races, I'll go watch the high SOF races, and when Connor races, I kind of try to pay attention to his line week after week because I know he gets some really good setups. So anything we can do, and I think definitely the second half of the season we turned it on. Brandon was finishing a lot better. The setups were getting better to drive, and like this setup this week, it had the spring package that I made from Texas put into it because I knew it was a pretty similar track. So things like that, the notebook's only going to get thicker, and we're going to be able to lean on other tracks week after week, we can kind of compare notes and be like, okay, well, this worked here. We could try this here. And as Richard said, we didn't have really anything until an hour before the race, and he kind of threw some things at it that I didn't try yet, and it hooked the car way up. It turned it from nothing to everything.
Brandon, how do you feel about your side of the team efforts to be able to work with this group and be part of what's been a potential dynasty in the making in terms of the team championship for the past few seasons?
Well, I'm very thankful. These guys gave me a shot. I admit I'm not that good at the Cup car. I was kind of wary, but they gave me a shot at it. It's been a learning curve. I still got a lot of learning to do, but I got some awesome teammates and team owners that are encouraging and help me understand how to drive this thing. So it's tough. I got a lot of learning to do, but these guys, these guys are awesome to work with and be friends with. They're very patient with me. I got to thank them for that.
Indeed. Want to go over to you, James, for this question.
Sure.
Now, what's it going to take to do it again, to outmatch your teammate in the championship title fight, to be able to out-total him, rather, in championships?
I think just keep doing what I'm doing. He's no slouch, obviously, but sometimes bad luck happens. I think he kind of had an up and down year where he was either first or on pit road stuck with some issue. It wasn't like that with me. I think I only had 4 total incident points, but it fell in my favor. And I've noticed when I've won in the past, the next season doesn't always match. Like I would think one year I got the championship, the next season I was 16th in points. It really varies, but I'm just going to treat it the same week after week and then make the system work and make a schedule for myself and just stick to it and design everything pretty similar and drive the setups the same way and try to make it all fall into place. I'm not too sure what the tracks are in season 2, but I know I'm not good at every single one, but a few of them I'm pretty excited for.
Brandon, anything else you'd like to add that I didn't ask about towards you?
I'm just going to try to keep the momentum going the next season. I incredibly thankful for James and Richard. Awesome job by them this season. Ty and Tommy, my team owners, very patient with me as a new guy to the Cup Series. Definitely got to thank Reaper Speed Lab, Private Label, Ethica, Road Trip Transport for all supporting me, and Treasure Coast Beer Hunters, my local beer group I got on there, my mom for watching every week, and then like my other viewers like my brother and my nephew and stuff that tune in and watch me race. I'm not Jimmy Johnson. I'm not going to win every week, but I try to get better. So it's been fun.
Congratulations, guys, on to James, the season championship, as well as the team championship efforts.
Thanks, guys. I'm glad you were here to see it.
Once again, Private Label Team Hypes, James O'Brien, Richard Reagan Jr., Brandon Walter, all joining us. Christian Schauner, meanwhile, was standing by with the third place finisher for tonight, Robert Bisson Jr.
Robert, the car looked pretty fast, but you kind of started at the back end of the top 10, and it just looked like it was kind of difficult to get into a position to really be able to challenge for the win. But, I mean, over the course of the campaign, you've got to be pretty happy with how everything's really worked out, because moving to open setups, you guys have looked really, really competitive. I mean, you're able to move your way through to the front of the field. You're able to genuinely contend. So, overall, how'd you kind of feel the season's gone?
No, I'm pretty happy with it, honestly. Like you said, open setups, I was very nervous about. Very nervous about having to, acquire a setup, or if I got a setup, was I going to be able to drive it? And actually, everything worked out well. This week, I actually was able to improve this setup, and Pat ran it tonight, and basically that was all he ran the setup, and I know he had a great finish as well. So yeah, we're pretty fortunate. We're lucky. We got our foot in the door, and hopefully we can keep getting better with these open setups and maybe contend here one of these seasons.
Yeah, I mean, both of you look extremely strong on the long run, and you kind of made that play towards the end of the race tonight to go for the undercut strategy, and it did get you out in the lead for a couple of laps, but kind of always knew that it was kind of gonna be a fight to sort of hold on to that, and it just looked like both Richard Regan Jr. and James O'Brien were just strong enough to be able to kind of overhaul you early on in the run, kind of at the point where the tire advantage was worth more than kind of the aero deficit of being sat behind you. So it was an interesting play to make, but unfortunately didn't come off this time. And was that kind of your hope, that you'd just be able to get out ahead of them, and them being behind you would kind of be at the aero disadvantage and not be able to get back by you? And because you were kind of about 5 seconds behind before you made that pit stop.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was hoping for. I mean, that first run, Richard got out to a good lead, and I was just watching a relative. I knew I was starting to catch James. I knew I had to just hit a good pit stop, but Richard started pulling away. I think he was saving a little bit, and James was as well. So I'm like, I'm just going to try to undercut him. I feel like if I can keep James behind me, wait for that tires to even out a little bit, we might have a race. I had a little issue. I'm not sure if I had much damage. Me and Brad just got caught in a transition, him on all tires. I just came out of the pits. I got him in the rear end. I'm not sure if it got damage or if it just messed me up mentally, but I think after that point, I overdrove the car. And just, after that, I was just trying to hang on and not let Brad catch me in the end after he pitted.
Yeah, it looked like it was just a minor amount of damage for both of you there. It kind of looked like you'd come out of the pit lane and he was kind of sweeping down. I think it was just a crossover, like you say. I'm from my perspective, it looked like he thought that you might just run all the way down to the white line and he'd leave you that lane open and you'd be able to get by back that way. But yourself, you kind of went to the preferred groove, as I call it, that one lane up, and he was already there, and it was just kind of a bit of a crossover. But kind of no harm, really. Both of you guys able to continue on, and I don't think it fundamentally impacted your finishing positions. But going through the next season, you got any thoughts? Obviously, you spoke a little bit about yourself and Pat kind of working on setups. What are the expectations for next season?
There's a lot of mental errors early this season. Me and Pat blew up a couple motors, just some dumb errors, some, not paying attention, trying to make adjustments in the car on the run and, catching a wall. Just eliminate these mental errors. The setups are there. We got a bunch of setups now we can look at. We can start comparing. I got telemetry finally today. Got the workbook up that I needed. So I'm really getting into that stuff, and I want to see how it's going to play out I think it's going to be a good season next season, and maybe even start a second team eventually. It'd be great for us.
It definitely sounds like you guys have got big plans for the organization, and I'm kind of glad to hear that you're enjoying working on the open setup side of things. I know a lot of guys find it pretty daunting, but it is something I myself have kind of pushed guys towards going, no, you definitely get into it, you can definitely play around, and you can definitely figure it out. And I'm glad to hear that you're kind of finding that and you are enjoying it. And obviously, before we let you go for the season, really, is there anybody that you'd like to give a shout out to? Yeah,
absolutely. I got my father-in-law, Richard. He's always watching the races, other friends and family. They're always tuning in. And I want to shout out to DOF Reality. I got them on the hood tonight. They'll be on the cars next season. They gave me permission to, kind of speak on their products. If anybody's not familiar, these guys run basically plug-and-play motion simulators. Something that was going to be, maybe never obtainable. I think these guys, are getting in the realm that these things are actually affordable, and you're getting something that, just the experience is ridiculous. I run a VR, and now running this simulator motion platform, the immersion is it's out of this world. And these guys are customer services out of this world. I mean, these guys are amazing.
That's great to hear. And obviously putting it to good use yourself. And thank you for coming and chatting with us tonight. And we wish you all the best for next season.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, guys.
Once again, we'd like to take the time to thank Richard Regan Jr., James O'Brien, Robert Bisson Jr., as well as Brandon Walter for speaking with us during post-race coverage here at the virtual Homestead Miami Speedway. Christian, it's been an interesting season. What are your final thoughts on 2021 Season 1 and how things played out this season?
Well, I think it was definitely interesting that the change to open setups. It obviously attracted a couple of new drivers to the series. We saw Connor Hall really kind of putting on a clinic, especially on the 1.5 mile tracks towards the beginning of the season. But James O'Brien and the private label Team Hype guys, they kind of just stuck at it. Obviously, Richard Regan Jr. struggled a little bit towards the beginning of the season, but final round of the season is kind of pretty much back to what we were seeing in terms of fixed setup, kind of just dominating the race from him. But a really great performance throughout the whole season by O'Brien to take the championship really just through ruthless top fives and not making mistakes. And I think hearing Robert Bisso Jr. talk about the importance of not making mistakes, kind of, there's no better example of what that does for you than James's championship.
Absolutely. A big win once more for private label Team Hype, both the drivers and team fronts. But we'd like to thank you for tuning in for tonight's exciting action from Homestead Miami Speedway. We'd also like to thank Charles Sumner and the rest of the Precision Racing League for organizing this strong series, as well as the title sponsors, SimMSA, along with Butt Kicker and NinjaTrader, for their support of the PRL Cup Series. We'd also like to take the time to thank the companies that provide the software and hardware for our broadcast listed now on screen. With additional thanks to Jude Luan, who provides our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of our great work. Thanks to the team today, and Christian and Sean. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, including upcoming races, you can find it at globalsimracingchannel.com. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can check out our merchandise for sale at gsrc.stormvy.com, or you can check out our social media on Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook at Global Sim Racing Channel, and Instagram at GSRC_Graham. Don't forget to head over to YouTube page and hit that big red subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, so you don't miss a moment here on the Global Sim Racing Channel. Now, the next race is scheduled currently tentatively March 21st. The track is to be determined based on the 2021 Season 2 schedule. Be sure to keep an eye on PrecisionRacingLeague.com for updates, as well as for the option to be able to compete in the various Precision Racing League competitions. We also have upcoming races for other series listed on screen, so be sure to check those out and mark them down your calendar. Until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.